Good morning, or it's good afternoon on a Sunday. Fishes are found in profusion in the Devonian. That's where we left off, worldwide flood, when we're examining what the worldwide flood did. Well, there's lots of evidence that there was one, which would then signify a recent creation and support creationism versus evolution. Let's take a look. Let's go to K35.htm and look for are found in profusion. You type that up, you'll get to right here. Fishes are found in profusion in the Devonian age, which is the ages that the evolutionists assigned to the rock strata based on their own calculations, which we find inconsistent in reality. According to, despite what they say in the textbooks, reality doesn't support the textbooks. And fishes are found in profusion in the Devonian age, often in great sedimentary graveyards, indicating violent deposition, and often in freshwater deposits. It is obvious that fish do not normally die and become fossilized in such conditions as these, but usually are either destroyed by scavengers or float on the surface until decomposed. This was sudden. The whole aspect of the fossil fish beds bespeaks violent burial in rapidly moving deltaic sediments, worldwide flood. The source of these masses of sediments in which the marine vertebrates were entombed is largely continental in nature. This, for example, is true of the most famous of the Devonian fish beds, those of the old red sandstone of Great Britain and the corresponding Catskill Mountains in New York. There are formations in the Catskill Mountains in the United States. The character of these deposits seems explicable only in terms of torrential streams carrying vast quantities of sediment entering the ancient lakes or seas of the areas and overwhelming and burying fish and other aquatic creatures by the hundreds of thousands. All of this is easily understood in light of the Bible, the Biblical Deluge, but is hard to account for in any other fashion. So much for evolution. We have the formation of coal beds, a product of massive short-term sedimentary activity. There are tremendous numbers of coal beds that exist all around the world and in most parts of the geologic column, implying unimaginably great accumulations of metamorphosed vegetable matter. And we have pointed out that the utter inadequacy of the uniformitarian subsidence theory to account for these beds. The physical evidence plainly and emphatically demonstrates the fact that the coal seams are water-laid deposits in which great agglomerations of plants were rafted down on the surface of the deluge rivers, then conveyed back and forth on the shifting currents until finally brought to rest in some basin of deposition, to be followed by a reacting current from another direction bearing non-organic materials perhaps. So we have layers, even though some life forms, according to evolutionists, belong in one layer, they end up in another, and then repeat it again. So then another current with a load of plant debris, and so on. The only evidence cited in favor of the so-called peat-bog theory of coal formation, which takes years and years, such as the upright trunks, the stigmaria, etc., can, as we have seen, equally well or better be interpreted as a result from the nature of the rafts of vegetation being floated into the final place of deposition by floodwaters. You have trees sometimes, and the trees get buried under sediment, but they stick up, and then more sediment comes. So you see a tree and poking through several different ages of the so-called evolutionary rock strata scheme, and it doesn't make sense. So Dr. Herbert Nilsson, after an extensive discussion of the physical and biological aspects of the coal seams and the two theories for their formation, the orthogonous growth in place, the theory, and the A-L-L-O-C-H, auto and allo, water transported theory. Okay, so it's growth in place or water transported. So sometimes something grows in place and then gets chopped off and goes someplace else, or sometimes that's where it grew up and it was buried. A steady autocanoous formation of the coal seams is just as improbable as was the other theory. I can't pronounce these words. Formation of the strata with fixed faunas and floras. I know what they mean, though. This difficult situation makes it necessary to look for the processes of immense magnitude and worldwide effects, which is the water transported theory, a huge amount of water. This conclusion is doubly significant in that Dr. Nilsson, who is a botanist and a paleobotanist of wide ability and long experience, was attempting to defend or expound upon a flood theory of geology and coming to his conclusions, but was literally driven to such a conclusion by the weight of the evidence. He has attempted to explain some of these things in terms of repeated cataclysms after the manner of Cuvier, but it is obvious that his conclusion as to the manner of coal formation fits in perfectly with Biblical Deluge. The question may be raised as to whether the plant remains, even if water laid in the manner supposed in the water transported theory could have been metamorphosed into coal in the relatively brief period of time since the flood. Got a lot of pressure, that'll be compressed quickly into coal. Somehow the impression prevails that immense ages would be necessary for coal to form, even after the materials have been deposited. Bacterial activity, pressure, and temperature have been generally assumed as the agents for converting peat-bog residues into coals. Recent studies have demonstrated their inadequacy. Too much time won't happen. Apparently the most likely agent is the application of shearing forces, and these would have been quite high during the post-deluge period of tectonic readjustment. Irving A. Breger, Geochemistry of Coal, says, nor would they require long ages to do the work. As Stutzer has noted, Petzold describes very remarkable observations which he made during the construction of a railway bridge at Altbrechtich near Freiburg, Germany. The wooden piles, which had been rammed into the ground, were compressed by overriding blocks. An examination of these piles, compressed piles, showed that in the center of the compressed piles was a black coal-like substance. In continuous succession from center to surface was blackened, dark brown, light brown, and finally yellow-colored wood. Coal-like substance corresponded in its chemical composition to anthracite, and the blackened wood resembled brown coal. Now Stutzer goes on to say, Stutzer was also described various experiments which had, with some degree of success, attempted to synthesize coal in the laboratory through application of various stresses. For these and other reasons more, the American coal geologist says, from all available evidence it would appear that coal may form in a very short time, geologically speaking, if conditions are favorable. And we submit this condition for its formation has never been so favorable before or since as during the deluge period. You need a whole bunch of water, worldwide flood. Local floods may not do the job. Now we have the Mesozoic strata dinosaur fossils. Proceeding higher in the supposed but falsely asserted geologic column, though not always or even usually higher in actual formational superposition, we come to the extensive so-called Mesozoic strata, including the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous systems. The index fossils for these strata are again marine organisms, especially the ammonites. Again, there are many different kinds of these and of the other characteristic marine creatures of the period, and apparently they fall into large numbers of more or less distinct horizons, which have been used as a basis for interregional and even intercontinental correlation. It is probable that these zones of similar assemblages of fossils and rock strata can be explained on much the same basis as the zone of similar assemblages of trilobites and brachiopods in the Paleozoic strata. In other words, that was explained as a worldwide flood. Similar evidence. Now, the supposedly equivalent continental strata of the Mesozoic contain probably the most interesting of all fossils, those of the great dinosaurs. The question of the sudden extinction of these powerful creatures that supposedly ruled the earth for so long is still one of the great mysteries of the uniformitarian paleontology. How about a worldwide flood drowned them all? That was pretty quick. Various theories have been suggested, such as destruction by volcanoes, changes in environments, eating of dinosaur eggs by increasing numbers of mammals, some sort of dinosaur disease or epidemic. What about the worldwide flood? Well, these are some of the theories that have been advanced to explain the sudden extinction of dinosaurs throughout the world. Each theory will explain the death of some dinosaurs in some places, but attempts to apply any of them or combinations of them to worldwide extinction have failed. This dinosaur story is like a mystery thriller with the last pages torn out. The most important part is missing. The most important part is that it is true that the paleontologist knows it. He also knows that the riddle will probably never be solved. With Good, White, and Stucker, the dinosaur quarry. They say, or at least, it never will be solved as long as paleontologists insist on uniformitarian explanation. The Biblical Deluge is a quite adequate solution. Won't consider it. If representative dinosaurs were taken on the ark, presumably young ones, then it's likely that their final extinction is accounted for by the sharp changes in climate after the flood. On the other hand, the sharp changes would be less oxygen and extremes of temperature. Dinosaurs are so big they need more oxygen in the air, about 30% more, to survive. On the other hand, some may have persisted for a long time, possibly accounting for the universal occurrence of dragons in ancient mythologies. Another mystery connected with the dinosaurs is the number of great dinosaur graveyards found in various parts of the world. The entombment of such numbers of such great creatures literally demands some form of catastrophic action. One such location, the Dinosaur National Monument in Utah and Colorado, in the Morrison Formation of the Jurassic, for example, has yielded remains of more than 300 dinosaurs of many different kinds. The quarry area is a dinosaur graveyard, not a place where they die. A majority of the remains probably floated down a westward flowing river until they were stranded on a shallow sandbar. Some of them, such as the Stegosaurus, may have come from a faraway dry land area to the west. Perhaps they drowned trying to ford a tributary stream or were washed away during floods. Some of the swamp dwellers may have mired down on the very sandbar that became their grave, while others may have floated for miles before being stranded. They all appear to have died in that way, one of those ways. One could hardly ask for a better description of the way in which these great reptiles were overwhelmed, drowned, and buried by the deluge waters. As far as changes within the dinosaur lines were concerned, the most conspicuous was the tendency for each group of fossils found in successively higher located strata to evolve from small ancestors to large descendants. This result of smaller to the larger would follow from the hydrodynamic selectivity of water, though. Sphericity, density, and shape, amorphous, specific gravity. On the other hand, if evolutionist Dr. Colbert, probably the chief authority on dinosaurs, says, it is interesting to note that giantism was achieved independently by various separate lines of dinosaurian evolution. Time and again in the collective history of these reptiles, a phylogenetic line had its beginning with small animals and very quickly progressed to animals of large or even huge size. When I just simply explain it, which explain it throughout the world, worldwide flood. So they would be buried in accordance with size, density, sphericity, specific gravity. Colbert says, however, the evidence points most strongly to a universal worldwide flood acting in accordance with the laws of hydrodynamic selectivity of moving water. It is not clear how much of this tendency has been inferred from actual fossil position in successive strata, but to the extent that it is based on an objective field evidence. It would seem merely to result from the abilities of the larger and more mature animals to escape flood waters longer. This is exactly what one would expect to find in general in the dinosaurian sediments of the deluge. They can go to higher places because they are bigger. More on this next time. Mammal fossil.